It's 8:01 on Thursday. Good morning. Welcome to Pivot Point Live.
Good
Tracy,
morning, Paul.
what's going on?
We I don't know, the hamster wheel in my life, in my head, is not running as fast as it should be, and I feel a little bit groggy, like kind of like the weather today out in southern Oklahoma. We got all kinds of rain, lower clouds, and so it's caused us to be just a little bit in the funk. But I'm trusting that Pivot Point Live will ramp us up.
Well, in the funk. So I woke up this morning, opened up my iPad, and as you know, we kind of do this organically. So I kind of looked at the thing, and since you said that, are we doing the high cost of low morale or the high cost of low morals? Based on the way you opened, I'm thinking it's high cost of low morale. So
That is so true. You know, we could have done that today and then used us as an example, but I think what would serve our audience best today is the high cost of low morals. What happens
right.
when a company, a business, the leadership has low morals? What could that be costing that company?
Well, I think we need to define, like, at least in concept, low morals, because that
Agreed.
is a matter of perspective. Um, Depending on what. So we need to make a definite definition on that. So give me a definition
Okay, so I'm
of
thinking
well, first, let
okay.
me finish. Defining what morals are, but then, like, what we're kind of talking about, what are high morals and what are low morals, because like I said, there's ethics, there's morals, there's a lot. This is a dance as opposed to a science, because it's a matter of perspective. So
Yeah,
I leave the floor to you.
I think you're right. I mean, like if you probably looked it up, if you Googled morals, probably you'd have some. I don't know. Somebody would had searched like moral. You know how they do a versus, like morals versus morale or morals versus ethics. There'd probably be something like that going on. But when I think of morals myself, I think of the standard by which I operate or the standards by which I behave.
Yes, the standards by which you behave.
Yes.
So that's
Yeah.
where we get into trouble right there, right? Because it's a matter of perspective, because everybody tries to put their moral perspective on everybody else. So we always talk. In fact, you've heard a lot lately in the news. Do they have a moral center?
Yes.
No, they don't have a moral center.
Mm.
So what's a moral center? Well, a moral center is the platform of morals that you've been raised with, and that's who you are. So when they say that, it's all based. Then you try to put a moral center to a group of people, like they have no morals.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean,
I get where you're going. So for me, like, and this is kind of like, this is likely the very first one that we have, not opposing views, but a view on morals from a perspective of, does your morals come from the environment you were brought up with? Does it come from the experiences you were giving in life? Does it come from the examples that were set before you? Like, hey, don't do this because, well, dad never did this, or dad did this, and that means it was acceptable for me, even if it's not acceptable in society. So, like, we have those. For me, if I left my morals up to what's acceptable in society, then I may be shifting away from my viewpoint. Stems from a biblical worldview. So I derive my morals from, like, this biblical code. That doesn't mean I follow it. Please don't get me wrong. I am no angel. And now I am a saint only because the Bible says that a believer is a saint. But I'm not like a saint in the respect of I don't do anything wrong. I do so many things wrong all the time. I don't get it right all the time. And yet I pastor a church. I lead a group of people. But when you said your moral center, when I think of moral center, you're right. My perspective in life goes back to, okay, my moral center is, what does the Bible say? What's the biblical example that I have to follow in the Bible? Because the thing about the Bible is, like, the Bible is absolute truth, but it doesn't mean that the people, that the characters in the Bible operated from a great moral center. I mean, because you've got some pretty disgusting things that happened in the Bible that were not like following the biblical code, but their story is given as an example of, don't do that.
So Tracy, I don't know if you're aware, but I am a saint. I'm a named saint, Saint Paul, and I write a lot of letters to the Corinthians.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I don't. If you've read my letters,
Yes, I have.
you'll know
The
that
first one was a little harsh. The second one was a little bit more comforting. And if you know anything about First and Second Corinthians, First Corinthians is a letter of rebuke. Second Corinthians is a letter of comfort. And so he rebuked first, and then he wrote back and said, now it's not all bad. You know, things are looking, he scolded first, and then he came back and loved them back to their feet.
He's just like I said, it's me, man. It's me. So,
certainly that is in the coaching space.
So the thing here is, I agree with you, and it's interesting. Through our conversations that I've kind of rebuked the Catholic Church because I grew up in Catholicism and all that good kind of stuff.
Right.
And kind of from a high level, it's a deeper story. But at the end of the day, I was working with a gentleman a couple of years ago who is a deacon in the Catholic Church, right? So, we were going around, and I operate from what I consider a good high moral center.
Yeah.
And I was doing the stuff I did and the way I operated and all that good kind of stuff. And he made a comment. He goes, you're very Catholic, even though you're not Catholic. He says, you operate from a very Catholic perspective. And I'm kind of looking at him because that irritated me, being that I've, kind of separated myself from the Catholic Church. And I was like, but as I thought about it over the years, over the past couple of years, and kind of got more into that self-retrospective view, I do realize that that your moral center can come from your upbringing.
Yeah.
It can come from religion.
Mm-hmm.
It also can come from hard knocks in the real world. Right. I have this thing called real unexpected consequences. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction.
Yep.
And part of people's moral code will be developed by how hard they get knocked back by doing something immoral, right? You know it as a kid growing up. You do something mommy and daddy told you not to do, and you went out and you got in a car accident, screwing around with the car in the rain, and you knew you weren't supposed to do it, and all of a sudden you're in a car accident, and you're paying out big consequences with the parents, with the wallet, with everything else, and then you go, I'll never do that again. And there is the development of what I would call a behavior based on a moral platform. How's that?
That is very well said. Repeat for me, real unexpected. What was it? Real unexpected what?
Real consequences. Unexpected consequences.
Yes.
Real consequences. So when I say real consequences, it's more about the way I raise my kids, right?
Yeah.
It is. There is the consequence of mommy and daddy saying you're grounded for the weekend.
Yeah.
That's not a real consequence. Right? But when you get in the car accident because you're driving too fast and you broke 2 legs, that's a real consequence. Because you can't walk for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay. Real consequences are how the world responds to your behavior.
Yeah.
Equal and opposite reaction.
Paul, I mean, I know we've gotten a little bit, and by the way, for our viewing audience, we've been a little bit philosophical, but there's power in understanding the high cost of low morals. The biggest thing is like, hey, because you got this low moral, you went to bed, you played games, whatever, you caroused that night before, and now you're an hour and a half late for work, and you're running in, and the expected consequence of that is, you get written up or something like that, like you said. But the worst is the unexpected. Like, you never expected that this would happen and it will fall out this way. So may I
You
may
may.
I bring to the call the story of the prodigal son?
Oh my gosh, we're going biblical. I love it. We're going biblical.
So,
Here we
so
go. Roll it.
okay, and I think this serves us. And by the way, you don't have to be a person of faith to accept that there are some great value in the Bible. If you haven't, if you don't read any of the Bible, that's okay. But I guarantee you could get a lot from Solomon's Proverbs. There, I mean, just pithy statements. But in the Gospel of Luke is where this story is recorded, and it's basically there's two brothers. Their mother had passed away. The dad was left to raise them. And of course, dads in those days, they raised their kids according to their own work. This is, that's, like, hey, now you're 13, you're now going to be employed by dad, and I'm going to train you. If I was a fisherman, you're going to now be a fisherman. If I was in construction, you're going to now be. That's the way that they operated in Jewish times. So basically, these two boys growing up, and then eventually the younger of the two said, Dad, I'm done with the business, the family business. I'm out of here. I don't want to be here anymore. You just give me what is the rightful inheritance, and I'm leaving. So he does that. Now here's the thing: what people don't realize is that the dad, he kind of goes one better. He gives both boys the inheritance, and people miss that. They think that it just was the prodigal, but he gave it to the younger, and he gave it to the older. The older chose to stay right where he was at with the inheritance. The other one took the inheritance and went into this, what the Bible calls, a far country. And the Bible says he wasted it in riotous or low moral living. He wasted all the substance. And so he had all these friends, he had all these women, wine, women, song, all this kind of stuff. Eventually, the finances ran out and the friends followed, and they ran out too. He finds himself without any shelter, without any bread. He goes and feeds pigs. Now, Jewish boys don't go around digging on swine. That's just not what they do. So he's doing something that, like, culture said you don't go with swine. That's an unclean animal. He's tending to the swine, and he's even desiring to eat what they eat because he's so hungry. And then here's what happens. There's a great line. It says, and he came to himself. Basically, the self-realization, what am I doing? This is not my father's servants eat way better than this. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my dad's house, and I'm going to tell him, I know I'm no more your son, but if you'll let me, I'll be your servant. It's such humility. He's running home, and on the horizon, dad has been looking for him. And when he sees him on the horizon, dad doesn't wait for him to come to him and apologize. Dad runs out to him. They embrace. He says, bring the fatted calf. He said, bring the ring, put it on his finger, the robe, the shoes. Let's clean him up. He's always been my son, but he wasn't acting like my son. So there in that whole thing is a dynamic of these low morals. But to your point, he was raised a certain way. He went out into life for a time, but then he came to himself and he realized, this is not the me that I should be. And it was hard knocks that put him, to your point, it was hard knocks that brought him to that point. Like, it wasn't the fact that he lost all his friends, all the wine, all the women, all the, whatever he was doing, wasn't the finances. It was when he was sitting in, like, these pigs and this culture that, like, totally, like, he's lost it all. And he's wanting to eat what pigs eat, the slop. That's when he is at his lowest point. Hard knocks taught him, I'm better than this. Okay, so now I set the scene. What did you hear from that? Talk to me on that one.
Well, I just it further tells me that that deacon was very, very correct, because I said the exact same thing. I just said it in a much shorter way.
Mm.
So it's that's kind of funny. But ultimately, we're talking about the high cost of morals in business, right?
Right.
So let's turn this frown upside down. What's
Okay.
the antithesis of moral or of bad morals? And I don't mean good morals.
Mhm.
What is the antithesis, right?
Okay, so the enemy, the arch rival of low
Bad
morals,
morals.
is not just high morals. So that is a great question.
I have the answer if you don't have it.
Well, I would be searching for it, but go ahead and give me your answer.
All right, great. It's high values.
Oh, I
So
love
if we've identified our values in our company,
love it.
and we are hiring and using, as I call it, the optics of your values,
Hmm.
you tend to bring people with good morals into your company. Bringing people with bad morals into your company is it's a cancer. We talked about this, right?
Hmm.
If you're the convenience store owner, they're stealing from the till.
Right.
Or if if they work for Enron, they're passing through false documents and false false contracts, and they're pumping it up. If they're Wells Fargo, they're putting out accounts that aren't real people so that they can pump up the valuation of the company.
Hmm.
That's what you get when you those it falls upon the CEO's accountability, but it's because of the people that he's hired that are doing these things so that they can look good in their jobs. High
Hmm.
cost, low morals, billions of dollars
Right.
in those companies that have been netted out in fines, jail sentences, all that. And by the way, do you think the companies are doing great business when no one can trust them?
No, absolutely not. No, yeah. I mean, you're not going to do business with somebody that you don't trust. I mean, as a customer, I mean, because
Yeah.
if I can't trust you, I'm not going to give you money. I'm not going to put my company at risk by partnering with you.
Yeah, and I mean, really, and you can feel it, you can see it when someone wants to do something under the table. When they want to do a deal and they don't want to pay taxes, or they do all this stuff. That it's a you can feel that slide going
Mhm.
on. That
Yeah,
they're going to drag you down with them
yeah,
wherever they're going to go.
yeah.
And a lot of these businesses do fabulous. They rock and roll for 10 years,
Mhm.
and they do great. And then somebody
Yeah,
realizes what they've
yeah.
been doing.
I've heard it illustrated this way that a company, it looked like they're exploding. It looks like they're swelling. It looks like they're expanding and scaling and everything. But on the inside it's rottenness and death, like roadkill. Roadkill on the side of the road, it's dead. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere. And yet, a couple of days, it begins to swell. Just because it's swelling doesn't mean it's growing,
That's
because
right.
there's death on the inside. And I think the one of the huge high costs is the death of the entire company. And you brought up Enron, like we brought up this last week. It's such a classic example of, I mean, the highest cost is that you are no longer what you were, because of the low morals that you have. You have no moral center, whether it was by experience, example, or environment. You're not following any of that. And to bring back into this the prodigal son, because I think it's such a great illustration. This kid goes out and he was instilled family, like as being a moral center, or like being important. Also service, because remember when he was out there, he's like, man, my dad's servants, is better than this. Communication. He had to come back to the dad and communicate. So there's these values that, even though he had distanced himself from him, basically, if you look at the dad as being a business, I have these values. I don't want to operate with these values. I'm out of here. Give me my last check, my severance pay. He leaves. He finds out how, like, the world doesn't operate by a set of values that dad did. They don't take care of you. In fact, the scripture says, no man gave aught unto him. No, nobody cared for him. But he goes back to this. There was this company that I used to work for that really cared for me. I'll go back and serve there. It was the values, and, like, to your point, the opposite of the low morals that he had in the far country was when he realized, he came to himself and, like, man, I have offered better than this with high values that were found at the Father's house. And so he kind of goes back to that job. He goes back to that career. He goes back to that environment and is like, I'd like to see if I could have my old job back. And I understand if I can't have my old job back, I'll just be a lesser job. I just want to work for the organization again because no one took care of me like this company took care of me. So you can like one of the high cost of low morals is that you lose great people.
Yes. Good people will not stick around your low moral, low value company.
Yeah. High value people don't stick around in a low moral environment.
Yeah. And conversely, low moral people won't stick around in a high value company.
Yeah. Oh, so true. Yeah. I mean, when the lights go on, the cockroaches flee.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
That is such a great thought. That's a great thought. So what does a company do as far as like assessing? I mean, like, so they'd have to assess their values to make sure that they're, like we qualified them by saying the opposite, the antithesis of low morals is high value. So a company that's, a company leader that's viewing this episode, what are some practical tips that they would need to know? Like, hey, I need to assess, what's the moral level? Are we low morals? Are we headed that direction? What are the private conversations? What is going on? Like, hey, Paul, and like when you have to look left or right before you have a conversation, what's about to come out is probably not needing to be said. It's probably going to be something, a criticism about somebody that I don't want anybody else to hear this. Like when you have to look left and right before you have a conversation, you're worried about somebody hearing the trash that's about to escape your mouth. It's almost like the tell sign. Like, I do not need to be hearing what this guy's about to tell me because he had to look left and right first. So how do you assess? How do you assess low morals?
Well, it's not, we've talked on many episodes about the vision, mission, values, and building those into your company and building your company culture. And high morals and high value or values are part of a company culture. So the first thing to ask yourself, if you're running a small company or mid or large company, is, are you clear on your vision? Are you clear on your mission? And are you clear on your values? Now, if you're the CEO, if you're opening a company, sometimes you adopt another CEO's values. And if you're taking on their position, and you've seen companies who have made switch in their values and what's really important to them. But are you clear on what your values are, Tracy? Are you clear?
Yes.
Are you clear on your values? Is that part of the value system that you're building into the culture of your company? If that is, okay, great. Then if you're clear, and now is your executive team clear on the values, do they all operate from that set of values?
Yeah.
Part of a good 25% part of a performance review should be, are they
yes
going towards the mission or vision? Are they completing the mission?
Yep.
And do they display the values of the organization consistently on a day-to-day basis?
Boom. You just said very articulately exactly what I agree. I could not agree with that more, because the culture is basically the expression of the values.
That is correct.
People are unclear about what the values are. Like I join an organization. Now, Freedom, you know this because you helped coach me through the whole Jeep Wrangler Rubicon thing. And it wasn't the Jeep that I wanted. It's what the Jeep represents. The Jeep represents something that's very close to my heart, and that's freedom. I want freedom. And you said, if you had it right now, what would you do? Well, this weekend I would take the top down. Me and my wife would go, and we don't need roads because we got 4x4 and stuff like that. I mean, you helped me understand, oh man, that's what it is. I'm operating to my value, but you had to help pull that out because people don't always see, why do they want what they want? There's probably a value. And sometimes, like, what is it that, oh man, it just makes me so mad. Oh, wait, I don't like it when companies take the freedom away from people and put them, like going to work is like slavery, because it's an anti-value, right? An anti-value pulls away. And sometimes that's how you discover what your values are. You're like, hey, so I've done that. Like, hey, what makes you angry? What do you see in the world that makes you angry? It could be an indication that this is an anti-value, and that's how you find it. Like, I hate lying. Oh, okay. So then honesty or integrity, something in there might be your value. Just discovering those and then expressing what they are in your company. But if they're not outlined, to your point, if you don't have clarity on those values, then everybody just shows up and expresses what their own values are instead of what the companies are. But I will say this just on that point, because I know you're going to have some great nuggets to pour into this. When I join a company, I have 5 core values. Like, these are like, I have values, but I have 5 core. You know, my family, my faith, my friends. If I've ever been your friend, I'll always be your friend. So like that way, we'll always pick up the conversation right where we left off, even if it's been 10 years. But because I value friendship. But then freedom and fun, those things, those are the 5 F's of my life. So if I'm joining an organization and it's fun, I'm free to do, they trust me, that kind of thing. I'm free to do my job. I don't have somebody looking over top of me. If I have that freedom, if that freedom gets taken away, now I'm no longer in alignment with my values and the company values, and I have to bounce. What are you thinking?
But I'm thinking, holy, that you took my whole dissertation away. That's what I'm thinking.
Man, you say it so much more eloquently than I can say it.
No, it's great stuff. And what I do find interesting is, like, you're like, and that's a good point. It's like, I don't know exactly what my values are, but I know what I don't like. So it is, and it draws into, like, once in a while, my wife will come home and she'll go, "Let's go out to dinner." And I go, "Okay." She says, "What do you want to eat?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't care."
Don't want pizza.
And then she instantly goes into a mode, "Okay, then what don't you want to eat?" And we go through that, and we isolate.
Wise woman.
Right?
Yeah.
We isolate that out. And then in 5 minutes, we're going to get Italian because everything else got knocked out. Okay.
Process of elimination.
Process of elimination. So that's kind of interesting to me, that I've never really thought about that. That's a really good nugget. If you're struggling, because this is a tough thing. Okay, this is introspection, not only on you, on your company and how your company operates. This isn't something you sit down and get done in an hour. You go,
Right.
"Okay, these are my values." Yeah, but are they?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
is this deep, or is this just like you're trying to project something? And that's where it goes wrong, because if you're just projecting something, then you're not going to build it into a culture, because you're going to go back to what I call status quo. If you're reaching too far outside, you go back to equilibrium. Okay? Equilibrium is your core values, even if you don't know what they are.
Yeah.
That's where equilibrium is. So you will get that. You have people with a low value equilibrium who are always in a state of, not low value, low moral equilibrium, and always in a state of, well, they're always looking to do something wrong, right? Do something that's not good. And they're always looking for a shortcut, or, doing something. Their equilibrium is very low. You could have a high value or moral equilibrium, and that's where you'll stay. You won't go outside of that. So if you identify the core values, as you put it, yours, that's where your equilibrium is.
Yeah.
And if something goes wrong, if you make a poor choice, right? If you make a poor choice that's outside of your value equilibrium system, and you realize it, sooner or later, you'll come back to equilibrium. Okay? It's like water, right? You throw your hand down in the water, and it makes waves and it bounces back and forth, but sooner or later it comes back to equilibrium, right?
Okay, Paul, that was great, because that gave me a little thought on, like, when I review the jobs that I had, the JOBs that I had, just over broke positions, and, like, why did I leave that company? It could be like, we were talking about low morals and high values, thinking like low morals is like, you're fornicating, you're adultery, or like that. But a low moral, could it not be said that if these are rivals, you got your high values and your low morals, anything less than your values, you begin to sink down into this low moral I mean, like, so if I accept, like, fun is for me. But if it's like no longer fun, the high cost of that, of the lower moral than the value that I have set of it's got to be fun. If I'm no longer, I love creating stuff. I love speaking. What we're doing right now, I love. If ever it was just like me just sitting here and never getting to exchange, it would be no more fun for me. And I'm sitting down, and the high cost of that is I don't get to participate. I'm not enjoying myself. I'm not, like, the joy is sucked from it. So the high cost of that is I'm still here, but I'm not enjoying it. So that could be a high cost of the low morals, because anything lesser than what my values are, I now become into this. I'm no longer energized to do my job anymore because you took the fun away. You took the freedom away. If you take my freedom away while I'm on the job and I no longer can do anything, and you got to do it for me, or you took my position away, well, then I'm not going to be giving my best. And that's a high cost for the company, because now you got my best when you were aligned with my values. But now when you took those things away, you're no longer aligned with my values. And now the high cost is I show up, but I'm going through the motions. I'm a hollow shell.
Yeah, and here's the kicker, right? If you, as the owner of the company, you've built a culture wrapped around the values system, and you're looking at the values through the optics of your mission, vision, values when you're hiring, you only hire people that align with the values.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
that situation shouldn't happen as long as you've built a culture that is firmly glued into its value system.
Yeah. And you are
And
so
ultimately you're putting on your, like, protection shield now. Your value system is your protection shield for your company.
yeah.
It stops all that bad, those laser beams from being fired inside your shield.
Mm-hmm. Mm,
So
yeah.
because
So
that's
I love the idea of thinking when you went to the recruiting, the hiring, the onboarding. So when you're looking for these people that, like, who measures up, you've got to create, like, instead of going online and saying, hey, where's a template for an interview script? Like, no, create your own, but create it according to your values. And you even mentioned about the performance review,
yeah.
that at least once a quarter you ought to be gauging your team on your values. If you have 5 core values, like, hey, commitment, respect, discipline, growth, trust. Okay, so you got these 5 values. Like, is Joe sometimes, always, or never trustworthy? Is Joe sometimes, always, or never committed? Like, just identifying the reality, and that way you can come back to Joe and say, hey, Joe, thank you for being a trustworthy person. I'm wondering, like, when I graded you on commitment level, I'm looking at, sometimes you're a little bit tardy. And I noticed that, and that goes to commitment for me. So you're a sometimes. How can we raise that up to being always committed? Like, because you're now identifying the reality, because what will show up and be expressed as the culture will be Joe's sometimes committed and sometimes not committed.
Well, and let's think about it. I like the value respect. That is, like, one of my number one. And you know this, right? I treat everybody with respect, and I also demand it.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you don't treat me respectfully, you're not around me,
Yeah.
guaranteed. And
Yes.
I treat everyone with respect. So respect's a great one because um, I think I think it's a sub core value.
Mhm.
I think it's, like, required to have a set of values, right?
Yeah.
But respect is a great one because I hire you, and I screwed up, and I kind of didn't dig this out, and I walked by you 3 times this quarter where you're browbeating one of your
Mm,
subordinates,
mm,
right? You're browbeating as opposed to raising them up and giving them the method, opportunity, and tools to do their job better, so they can fit. Instead, you're putting them down, and I see that 3 times. That's a core value,
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Number one, when I see it, I'm going to deal with it right away,
Right. Right.
right? But if I keep seeing it, then by the time it gets to quarterly review, we're talking about respect in that review. We have something to talk about.
Yes, right.
And if we can't meet that value, I might put you on a PIP, which is a performance improvement plan
Mhm.
based on the value of respect.
Yeah.
And if you can't start demonstrating respect at the highest level, we're going to have to part ways, because what you're going to do is create a cancer in my company.
Hmm.
You're going to turn those employees negative, and that cancer is going to start growing.
Yep.
And then
Right.
it's going to start, well, you know, there's one other manager who's on my staff who's like in that value set, but their equilibrium is just a little bit lower. We're trying to bring their equilibrium up, and they're seeing that and they think it's okay, and then they start doing it,
Hmm.
and then those employees start feeling better, and all of a sudden you're sitting at the top of your ship steering it down the road, and the whole engine room is blown up.
Yeah.
Nothing's moving forward anymore.
Mm. And so Paul, that great analogy. When that day does happen, the people that were not, they're more or less respectful because that's how they're great. But they feel like, well, in order to survive in this company, I make good money, and I'm so close to my retirement or whatever. In order to survive, I've got to become what I'm not, so that I can just kind of get out of this. And there's a company in our town, huge company, well-known organization. If I said the name, everybody on this call has used their products or know about their products. Huge company, let's say 1,100. Those people, the culture in that environment is such that when people come in there, they're like, and just like, I'm doing that job. I mean, like, I'm happy doing this one. I don't want to do anything more because like they'll require more out of it. It's such a like it's not my job culture.
Yeah.
I
Oh, yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like that. And then here's the thing: when they clock out, you ought to see them. They the entire parking lot. I mean, like they are speeding. I mean, like it's not 20 miles, 15 miles an hour in the parking lot. They're like 50 miles. They cannot wait to get out of that. And then when I've served them in like when I was at Chick-fil-A, I'd serve a lot of them that were coming over there. They're happy, they're joking, they're doing all this stuff. But when I talk to the people that have been in the environment, they're not that way. They are not themselves in the environment when they leave it. As soon as they clock out and they get in their car, they become freedom. I like they've got this they have to be somebody they're not in this organization in order to survive because they're so close to retirement or well, where else am I going to go and get paid what I'm getting paid here?
Right, right.
So that,
So
that self-respect is missing.
yeah. So I mean, I've or described it as cancer. Um, but if you think about morals as chemicals, if you mix the two wrong chemicals together, you can get a toxic gas, right?
Oh
And that's what you're getting.
yeah,
You're mixing
bleach and
no
ammonia.
morals, no value system. Anything can pour into the pot that can pick up whatever tool that they need to do it. And you're mixing all these chemicals together, and you have no idea
Yeah, and,
what
and that like when you got a
kind
sack.
of toxic gas you're creating.
Yeah, when you got a sack of potatoes and they just smell horrible, but the top of them look just fine. So if you're only investigating the top of the onions, the apple, the one bad apple spoils a whole bunch. You're looking at the top. You're not actually seeing it. But when you get down there, if you put your hand down, you're like, oh man, there's something mushy down here. You get down to ground zero. And so for a company, when you're looking at what is the origin, what is the source of this ugliness that's kind of pervading the company, let get cut out the cancer. Don't try to
Cut the
reform.
cancer out.
You can't
Yeah.
reform cancer.
But you don't know you have cancer until you do some tests. And you
Yes.
can't do some tests until you benchmark. So
Boom.
the benchmark is being clear with your values and building your culture in your company based on those values. And
Yeah.
I don't care the size of the company.
Yep.
Could be the local hardware store, could be the local convenience store, could be freaking AT&T.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Unless you're clear on that set of values and you are managing behavior based on those values,
Yeah.
you're never going to know what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I want to leave with. That's the big cost.
That's a huge
Billions of dollars in many companies.
takeaway. My big takeaway is right there at the end. getting, I mean, like when you are very clear everywhere that you operate, you've got the values not just pasted on the wall, but they're part of who you are. It's how you operate, it's how you run. You grade people by it, you promote people by it, you know, not just because they're competent, but do they have these values? You hire according to it. You pepper in your interview script questions that lean to what you're really looking for. Yeah, it's great that you've done this in another organization, but can you do it with dignity? Could you do it with honor? Could you do it with respect?
And I'll leave one last point before we go, the pivot point.
Yes.
You cannot,
Mm,
in any way, shape, or form, build a company culture on a value system that is not yours, because you have to be the
mm,
example. And if you're falling to equilibrium and it's
yeah.
below the values that you've put forward for your company culture, it will not work. So
Mm,
make sure you know yourself.
hmm And to thyself be true.
Be true.
So you gave Socrates, I gave Shakespeare.
There you go. All right. Well,
Great
thank you
stuff,
for joining
Paul.
Pivot Point Live.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this was an awesome discussion.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. We'll see you next week.